I want to be upfront about something. I am not a confrontational person. I don't yell. I don't leave notes. I don't post passive-aggressive things on the neighborhood app. But for the last 6 months, I have been ensuring that my neighbor receives at least one parking ticket per week. And she has absolutely no idea it's me. She's been posting on Nextdoor, asking why the parking enforcement keeps harassing her. I have read every single post.
Let me describe my street so you understand the full absurdity of this situation. It's a half-mile long, street parking on both sides, maybe 3 houses on the entire road without a driveway. Mine is one of them. Pause 1. I'm not talking about a scarce urban block where people circle for 20 minutes. I'm talking about a road where, on any given day, there are enough open spots to park a small fleet. Pause 1's about a year ago. A new neighbor moved in across the street. Let's call her Lauren. She has a driveway, a perfectly good driveway, directly in front of her house with room for multiple cars. Pause 1. For reasons I still do not fully understand, she decided that the spot directly in front of my house across the street from her driveway, on a public road, belongs to her. Not her driveway, a public street that she has designated for herself. Pause 2's within the first week, I found a note on my windshield. I want to be precise about the tone of this note. It was not a polite request. It was not a neighborly concern. It was written in the voice of someone reminding a stranger that they have parked in a reserved space at an airport. Pause 1's please move from my designated spot. I stared at that note for a while. Then I moved not because she asked me to, but because there were 40 other perfectly good spots available and the whole situation felt too small to fight over. Pause 2's but then something happened. The notes didn't stop. They spread. My guests started finding them. My friends would text me there's a note on my car. Other people who had nothing to do with me, who had simply parked on a public road in a neighborhood with abundant parking, were receiving formal written complaints from my neighbor about her designated spot. Pause 1's that's when I started paying attention. And that's when I noticed something useful. Pause 2's Lauren has a habit. She parks crooked, not a little crooked, genuinely, consistently, impressively far from the curb, and sometimes facing the wrong direction entirely. Pause 1's my town has a parking enforcement department that I can only describe as deeply committed to their work. These are people who were born for this. They ticket with enthusiasm. They ticket with thoroughness. They ticket, I have come to understand, for any reason at all. Pause 1's all they need is a call. Pause 2's the first time I called, I was genuinely just reporting a violation. Lauren's car was parked so far from the curb, it was practically in the middle of the road. I made the call. An hour later, there was a ticket on her windshield. Pause 1's I felt briefly like I should feel guilty. I did not feel guilty. I felt calm. Pause 2's that was 6 months ago. I have since developed what I would call a consistent practice. Every time I notice Lauren parked illegally, which is frequently, because Lauren parks illegally with the confidence of someone who has never once been ticketed, I make a call. Pause 1's the parking enforcement arrives. They do their job. Lauren gets a ticket. Pause 1's the beautiful part, the truly satisfying part, is that our parking enforcement has a reputation. Everyone on the street knows they're aggressive. So when Lauren started getting tickets, the obvious explanation was simply aggressive enforcement. Not your neighbor has been reporting you every single week for 6 months. Pause 2, she's made several posts on Nextdoor now. Why does parking enforcement target this street? Has anyone else been getting tickets? Is there any way to file a complaint? I have read all of them. Pause 1's I have not replied to any of them. I park legally. I leave notes on no one's windshield. I have not spoken to Lauren once about any of this. Pause 1, she is still leaving notes on other people's cars about her spot. I am still calling parking enforcement when she parks illegally. This is week 26. Pause 1's I think we'll both keep going for a while. Hello, I'm Dr. Julian Reed. I want to take a slightly different approach with this story, because not every conflict benefits from heavy psychological framing, and this one is best understood through a simpler lens. What Lauren is exhibiting is a textbook case of what I call territorial claim escalation, the behavioral pattern of asserting ownership over a shared resource. Not because the claim has any legal or practical basis, but because the assertion itself becomes a form of identity. The parking spot is not really about parking. It is about the feeling of control over a small piece of the environment. When that feeling is threatened by a legally parked car, by a guest, by a stranger who has done nothing wrong, the response is disproportionate precisely because the claim was never rational to begin with. Ryan's response is, from a purely behavioral standpoint, elegant. He did not confront. He did not escalate emotionally. He found a structural consequence. Lauren parks illegally. Parking enforcement exists. A phone call connects the two, and he applied it consistently. Is this petty? Technically, yes. But there is a meaningful difference between petty behavior that invents a grievance and petty behavior that enforces an existing rule against someone who was already behaving badly. Lauren is being ticketed for violations that are real. Ryan is simply the reason those violations are being noticed. The next door posts are, from a psychological perspective, the most revealing detail. Lauren does not ask herself whether she might be doing something wrong. She asks whether the system is targeting her. The assumption is always external. The cause is always someone else. This is what makes certain kinds of entitlement so durable. It comes with a built-in immunity to feedback. Every consequence is reinterpreted as unfairness rather than information. Ryan understands this implicitly, which is why he doesn't try to teach her a lesson. He just makes a phone call, subscribe to Soul Stories, and tell me, is Ryan in the right? Or is 6 months of weekly tickets starting to cross a line? Leave your answer below.